of silence for world peace and for the COVID situation that we have today.
मुझे ऐसे देखकर बाहर वाले को नहीं सोचेंगे ना इनसे गिरा और कल को हेलो चला गया.
Thank you very much. Warm welcome to each one of you. Thank you for coming in such large numbers. Good to see you all. Good to see some smiling faces. I guess it's because all the lockdown restrictions have been removed. And I hope this continues and we don't have to go back into a lockdown situation. So good to see you all. Hope to see more of you and probably a lot more meet you physically over the next couple of months. I must welcome our chief guest and a speaker today, Mr. AVM Shanmugan. Wonderful to have such a accomplished personality amongst us today, Mr. Shanmugan. Glad you could make it, and we are really privileged to have you here and listen to you and hear your experiences. We also have a few guests today who I want to welcome. We have Vinay Pai's parents, Mr. C.M. Pai and Dr. Hema Pai here with us today. Can we spotlight them, Samir, if you can see them? Right. We also have Rotarian C.N. Kumar from Rotary South. Is that right? Rotarian C.N. Kumar, you could say hello to us. Okay, great. Let's get going then. Can I ask, request Nanda to make the secretary announcements, please? Nanda?
Yeah. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, the last week, we all know, as the president said, the government has been lifting restrictions, but whether it has been on a Zoom platform or on a physical platform, we have been able to do quite a bit of work in the last 1 week. Actually, we had the first board meeting that was held on a Zoom platform on Saturday 3rd. And then after that, the Community Services Committee started the year's projects on Saturday the 3rd by distributing nutrients and vitamins to a government model school that also has an orphanage attached to it, in which about 70 students reside. Similarly, then the Community Services also organized a vaccination drive in association with BPAC and BBMP on Monday, the 5th July. The drive for a change was organized in an open area in the Coles Park, and 220 persons from the age of 18 upwards were vaccinated free of cost. The senior citizens also held the installation meeting on Sunday, the 9th of July. And again, that was on a Zoom platform. And now the Vocational Services Committee has actually initiated the planning process to commence a vocational training program at RHL as a joint project with Bosch and Rotary Junction. So that's what has happened during the last 1 week. Various committees have started working on it. And now coming to the days of where we have celebrations. Rotarian Kurian and Rohit Karan celebrate their birthday today. I didn't see them there. I'm not too sure if they're here. Again, as in the last week, there are no aunts or partners celebrating their birthdays this week. But for wedding anniversaries, we have quite a few. Nasser, Fazal and Sahina celebrate their wedding anniversary today. And Pradeep Agarwal and Anita celebrate their wedding anniversary tomorrow. And for Rohit, it's quite a busy week. He's celebrating his birthday today, and he and Ramya are celebrating the wedding anniversary tomorrow. So wishing all the celebrities of the week the best of health and happiness in the coming years. And now for the business meeting that is coming up this week. The Club Services Committee is having their first meeting on Saturday, the 10th July at 7 p.m. on an online platform. And then on the 15th, the installation meeting is planned as a hybrid one. The meeting is scheduled to commence at 5 p.m. with fellowship. Since there's a night curfew from 9 p.m. is still on. And the meeting is planned to be held in a hall that has a capacity of 40 people with social distancing norms followed. And at the moment, the main invitees would be the previous and the present board members, besides the chief guest and some officials from the district. And of course, our members, if any, who would like to attend in person. For that, actually, an email will be sent out tomorrow and arrangements shall be made for those who are interested in attending. And once they respond to the mail, because please respond to the mail so that we can arrange for seating, maintaining the social distances. And the details of the meeting will soon be shared. Well, that's it from my side for this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanda. I do look forward to seeing many of you on the 15th for the installation program. Do come. Do let us know in case you're coming so that we can make arrangements. Very important because the hall is pretty small. So do let us know. To the birthday boys, once again, very happy birthday and the anniversary couple. I hope you received the intimation that a tree has been planted in your name for this occasion at Villipuram in Tamil Nadu, and you must be very happy about that. Moving forward, can I now request our Rotarian Prashant Nair, the program's chair, to introduce our distinguished chief guest, please. Prashant, over to you.
Yes. Very, very good evening to everyone. It's indeed a fine evening, and thank you all for coming in. Mr. AVM K. Shanmugan has the big responsibility of carrying forward the wonderful legacy of his grandfather, Mr. A.V. Meiyappan, the South Indian movie mogul and founder of AVM Productions. This is certainly not an easy task, as to match up with a person such as AVM, who was very industrious and a true visionary. A person who introduced film stars such as Shivaji Ganeshan, Dr. Rajkumar, Kamal Hassan, and many more, and provided livelihoods to countless employees and indirect employment to many people connected to the film world. Mr. AVM Shanmugam did his early schooling in Don Bosco at Chennai and later moved to Shishya, completing his ICSE in 1977. After finishing his schooling in 1979, while in the first year of college, he was one of the 2 invitees from India to be invited by an American company called Inphonics for a course in audiography in Hong Kong. After his training in Hong Kong in 1980, he started an audio company by the name of AVM Music Service in 1980. He graduated in first class in commerce from the Vivekananda College in 1982. He got into film production under the banner of AVM Productions Private Limited in 1983 and worked as an executive producer for the Telugu film Punnami Nagu, which was Telugu mega star Chiranjeevi's second film. Subsequently, he became a director in AVM Productions, and from 1983 to 1986, he produced 8 films, 4 in Tamil and 4 in Telugu, 1 which became a super hit and 3 hits. As film production became highly volatile, he focused on film infrastructure. He was the first in Chennai to have a surround sound studio and expanded on other sound facilities in filmmaking. Mr. Shanmugam is currently the joint managing director of AVM Productions Private Limited. Having a passion for production, he diversified into multilingual TV serials from the year 1996 until 2009. These serials were aired very successfully across Sun TV, Vijay TV, Raj TV, Vijay TV, and ETV. And during this time, the full infrastructure development of post-production facilities of television was done. Mr. Shanmugam is the secretary of AVM Rajeshwari Educational Trust, which runs the Avicii Higher Secondary School, having a total student strength of 2,000 children. In 1995, he took over the management of AVM Rajeshwari Primary and Nursery School. Under his able management, guidance, and foresight, he upgraded the primary school into a matriculation higher secondary school. Currently, they have a strength of 1,000 children and produces 100% pass results. The school today has the Tamil Nadu's best basketball and cricket teams. The AVM Cricket Academy was founded in 1999, where over 250 children in various age groups undergo intensive coaching in cricket. A rolling trophy was also initiated in the name of their founder, Mrs. AVM Rajeshwari, called AVM Rajeshwari Rolling Trophy for boys 10, 11, and 13 years. They also have the GD Gopalan Rolling Trophy. The AG Milka Singh Rolling Trophy are annually conducted by the AVM Cricket Academy. He is also the patron of Chennai Basketball Association and is also involved in the Mahendran Memorial Basketball Association run by the customs officers in memory of the officer Mahendran. He is currently the vice president of the Chennai Chess Association. He also held the position of the vice president of the local advisory committee of the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam's temple at T Nagar at Chennai. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. AVM K. Shanmugan. And before I request Mr. AVM Shanmugam to speak, we have a small clip which we would like to play. May I request Samir, if he's there, to play the clip out. Thank you.
I'm sure all of us have heard that tune many, many times, and one of us knows AVM so very well. But after hearing the introduction, we didn't know that you're into so many activities other than just film production. Wonderful to have you. Delighted to have you, Mr. Shanmugam. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, President, and thank you very much, Prashant, for inviting me this evening, this wonderful evening. Since you started off with a monogram, I should tell you something over a couple of things I would like to tell you about this monogram. Basically, my entire talks are going to be on my grandfather, Mr. AVM, and I'll also tell you why AVM and how the whole thing came into it. And talking of the monogram, this music was inspired and composed on the basis of All India Radio's music. You all know the opening of All India Radio, which opens up first thing in the morning. And if you listen to it, these two have got a very, very close link. So this was composed by Sudarshan Master way back in 1945. And of course, the monogram has slightly changed his look to the time, but we didn't want to modernize it and to completely distort its version of it, like, 20th Century Fox or anything like that. So we just stuck onto it. Prashant had told me that he would like to speak about AVM. So I thought, when I heard the word AVM, I thought a lot of people should know. AVM is nothing but one man's life. It's a life of Mr. A.V. Meiyappan, the founder of this organization, my grandfather. So I'll be referring to him as my grandfather because in the flow, that's how I could be comfortable. And Mr. AVM was born in the year 1907, July 28th. To us, it's a Founders' Day, which we have in all our schools. And with reverence, we have a lot of reverence, and we have taken a lot of inbuilt things from him. I as a grandson, I watched him grow, and our very passionate days that we spent with each other were in Bangalore, in our house in 248 Upper Palace Orchard Road, which is currently Mr. Rajkumar's house. Mr. Rajkumar wanted to buy that house from my grandfather, and he insisted, and he took that house. And he lived in that house later on. Because today I was told it's cut into two, and two of his sons live over there. It's 248 Upper Palace Orchard Road. My growing years in Bangalore was in Bangalore. Every holiday we were there. My grandfather's favorite destination, I would say, was Bangalore. So starting from his birth, and then his work, whatever it is. He was only son of my great grandfather, who was Mr. Avichi Chettiar. Avichi is the name of my great grandfather, and AV comes from the word Avichi and Meiyappan. So that's how AVM has been coined. And he was only son, and probably when he was doing his sixth or seventh form, eighth form is what he completed when his father passed away. He was very fond of his father. His father had a small departmental store called AVM Sons, which still exists in a place in Karikudi where we come from. We are Chettiars and we come from Karikudi. And there's a place called Kallukatti, and in Kallukatti, this shop still exists, AVM Sons. Of course, my cousins have rented it out in a different name, but the building still exists. And there's an old marketplace which existed in the 1800s, which is still over there. My great-great-grandfather was from Kuala Lumpur, who did, a lot of Chettiars have been to Kuala Lumpur to do business. And they were in the business of bankers. But whatever reasons, my great-grandfather, Mr. Avichi, did not want to get into banking business, that he started the small little departmental stores. He had to come himself to come to Chennai. Then Chennai was Madras. Come to Madras to buy whatever he wanted to, provisions, whatever it is. And he did not have any assistants. So he used to close the door and come over to Chennai to buy whatever he wanted to buy. Grandfather used to take care of the shop at times, whenever his father was away and got back. They had boards like, fair shops, there was no bargain. These were boards which were put up over there. And the shop did fairly well in those days. Later on, my grandfather lost his father due to cataract. Probably surgeries were not very well performed on the days. And he was very, very young in his age form when he lost his father. So that put him into a responsibility of leaving his education and getting in to look after AVM Sons. So he started coming over to Madras, where he met up one Mr. Narayana Iyengar. And through their contacts, they had got agency for records. And he started selling records, and that became a good business. So he thought he will pursue it further. So he came back to Madras, and he joined into a partnership with Mr. Narayana Iyengar and another gentleman, and they started a business called Saraswati Stores. This was bang opposite LIC building. It was started in the year 1932, and the business did very well. Initially, they did a lot of devotional songs where it did not do well. And then grandfather bought in, the tribal singers from Madurai were bought in here. And that became a big success. And those songs were very, very, very big hits. One leading to another, he decided that he could get into film production. And in 1934, he decided that he will start producing films. And he got into a partnership and formed a company with the same name, Saraswati Film Takis, and the film was called Ali Arjuna. This film was made in Calcutta. So he had to take all the actors to Calcutta. And there he had hired a studio called New Theatres, where he produced this film. And once the film was over, he realized that most of the people had their eyes closed. The lights were too strong. And the entire film was shot where they had just closed their eyes, and they couldn't focus on the lights. So after he had finished the film, whatever edit was done, the film it didn't do well, and he lost 80,000 rupees way back in 1934. But he did not give up on it. He wanted to try it once again, and next, into 1936, they had wanted to produce a film called Ratnavalli, for which they went back to Calcutta. And in Calcutta, they decided they will not go back to that studio, and they went to Pioneer Studios, which was then the most popular studio in Calcutta. And there he had met a friend who had met the earlier time, and he suggested that he had a new camera. He had a new camera, and he had a new camera. So he decided to go ahead for a shoot with this new camera. At the end of the shoot, he realized that the camera's sound and the frame did not sync. They did not connect it. So when the dialogues were recorded at 48 seconds, the picture was at 50 seconds. So there was no lip sync. So literally, he did not give up hopes. He sat himself and he edited the whole thing and got them to sync on each other. And once again, this film was a disaster at a time, leading into a loss of 1,50,000 in 1936. He did not give up hopes. The next film he decided he would do was not in Calcutta, but in Pune. So he ventured out to Pune to make this third film called Nandakumar. He had this little boy called T.R. Mahalingam who had acted in it, who had a very good voice. This Nandakumar film was a Marathi film made in Hindi and Marathi, and he tied up with the same producers to do the Tamil version of it. So having got this combination, his cost he thought would be low, and worked on it. And then he did the versions, whatever he had to do with this little boy, T.R. Mahalingam, and shot this film. Hindi and Marathi were very big hits, but that concept did not work out in Tamil, and that was again a flop. So he began his career from 1932 to 1937, bringing in huge losses and not able to cover it with different partners. The third partner was a gentleman from Bangalore who owned Apsara and Alankar Theatre. His name was Jayantilal Thakur. So he was my grandfather's partner for the third film. So they decided at that point of time, we cannot do a film without a studio. So let's start a studio. So Pragati was the new name of this new company, which they had launched, and they decided to have Pragati Studios. So by then, they had, this gentleman from Bangalore had bought a lot of land in Whitefield way back in 1940 for the new studios. So grandfather was also getting ready to go back to Bangalore to do this, get his production done in Bangalore rather than doing it in Calcutta or Pune. At that point of time, he realized his first company, Saraswati Stores, the music recording company, was handled by his partner, Mr. Narayana Iyengar. And Narayana Iyengar did not consult grandfather, and he took a lot of major decisions, leading the company into huge losses. My grandfather considered Narayana Iyengar as his mentor, like his father. Ever since he lost his father, he thought Mr. Narayana Iyengar was his father. But somehow down the line with Narayana Iyengar's whatever attitude or behavior, they both fell apart and they had to end up Saraswati Stores partnership. So grandfather decided to leave the partnership and go away because he was not too happy with the way Mr. Narayana Iyengar had behaved. So as he was waiting and working on the accounts, Mr. Narayana Iyengar called him for a meeting and said, you take over the company and I'm leaving this company. I'm going into film production and I'm doing with Mr. Sriramlu Naidu of Pakshiraja Pictures, Coimbatore. So you take over the company. So grandfather was left and forced to pay off Mr. Narayana Iyengar and take over Saraswati Stores completely. So whereby he could not go to Bangalore as he had discussed with Mr. Jayantilal. And so Mr. Jayantilal, otherwise AVM Studio would have started off in Bangalore. But Mr. Jayantilal left for Bangalore, and I don't have much information of what happened to the Whitefield land. Today, of course, Whitefield is a very prominent location in Bangalore. So once that was over, he decided he was going to start his own studio. So looking at studios, he wanted some equipments. So he decided to buy a few equipments where he bought a recorder and few things. And somebody suggested that Vijayanagaram Palace was available for rentals. There was a murder that had happened in the palace and nobody was willing to go into the premises. And in that palace was a 60 by 40 shed. So that is ideally suitable for shootings. So he decided that would be the best location for his own studio. And they decided to start Pragati Studios over there. So Pragati, that is the first studio, the parent studio of Avicii was Pragati, which was born in, this is in Admiralty House. Today, the premises still exist. It's quite close to Prashant's grandfather's house in Chennai. It's just down Arepuram on the right. It was just open beachland in those days where this property exists. So that is where the first studio started off. So having moved into the studio, they decided they need to make a film. And a very peculiar situation happened. The first film that they produced there was called Bukailash. Bukailash had a Marathi director, Tamil producers, grandfather and his partner, one Mr. Sivan Chettiar, and there were two partners. So they were Tamilians, and the actors were all Kannadigas, and the film they produced is a Telugu film. The first time they saw success was with the release of Bukailash. It was a super duper hit in Telugu, and the film ran for 25 weeks, where he established himself as a producer. They went on to make, from 1940 to 45, they went on to make 5 or 6 films. And then he decided cost consciousness, working backwards, working on cost. And finally, he made a film called Sabhabadi, which he decided to direct himself. If you're Tamil film goers, you'll all be knowing this comedy film, which was the first full-length comedy film called Sababadi, which grandfather himself directed. And he used to pick up his casting in his own car, pick up everybody, go to the studio, and then shoot. It had T.R. Mahalingam in a role, and the film ran to be a big hit. This film was produced at a cost of 32,000 rupees. He was able to reduce cost from 1,80,000 rupees back to 32,000 rupees, and Sababadi was a big hit. Marcus Bartley, the cameraman, well-renowned cameraman, was introduced from Pragati Studios. So it was at that point of time, they were making these small films. They decided to make something really big. And at that point of time, they wanted to do a film with Tyagaraja Bhagavathar, MKT Tyagaraja Bhagavathar. He was then the superstar, like what Rajinikanth today is. And Tyagaraja Bhagavathar has been making films, and in the 40s, every film was a bigger hit than his earlier films. He had made films like the last film he did was, the film that grandfather had signed with him was Raj Yogi. He was doing Shiva Kavi at that point of time. So he told grandfather, I will do for you, but you will have to wait. I can only do one film at a time. So left with no choice, they thought they would wait. And that was a time when Mr. Tyagaraja Bhagavathar got arrested. And there was this Lakshmikantan case where it's a very, very notorious case which happened. And he was doing a lot of yellow journalism where he was exposing Tyagaraja Bhagavathar. And finally, there was a murder, and Tyagaraja Bhagavathar went to jail. So because of that, this Raja Yogi could not be made, and the film was abandoned. So that's when grandfather decided that he would do this. He had a script earlier, and he was a very, very staunch devotee of Lord Muruga. So he wanted to do a love story with Lord Muruga, which was Sri Valli. And Sri Valli was basically a story between Muruga and Valli and their love. And there was an elephant which played a major role in it. So he was earlier thinking of casting Tyagaraja Bhagavathar, but with Tyagaraja Bhagavathar getting into jail and not having him, he was thinking who he could cast. And that's when he remembered this little boy. He probably would be 20 years. It was going to be about 7 years since I had met him, T.R. Mahalingam. So he called back T.R. Mahalingam to start acting in this film and told him that T.R. Mahalingam opted to act for any money, but grandfather had one condition, that he will not act in any film till Sri Valli releases. And then it was agreed that he would act at 3,000 rupees, for which grandfather signed him, and he took up this project to do it. The actress for the film initially was being decided, and then Rukmani was casted. Rukmani is the current Lakshmi actress, Lakshmi's mother. She was casted in the role. She was very flamboyant, very, very beautiful looking, and her walk was something very appealing. And then this entire film was made. And after the film was made, he had his own recording recordist who had really put up a very nice, levels of T.R. Mahalingam's voice, which was very strong and very appealing. But next to his voice, Rukmani's voice was sounding very, very bad. And she had a very malish voice, probably, the voice of Lakshmi and her family, that sort of a voice. So that could not match the voice of a heroine. So grandfather had no other choice but to redo all the songs. For the first time, they had to finish the shoot and go and match the voice. And they had another actress who had done in his earlier film, Sababadi, called Periyanayaki. So they called her over to do the reposting of the songs. So the songs were all completely redone and reshot. This film released, and this was Pragati Studios, our grandfather's biggest hit. This film ran in Madurai for 55 weeks. It was a super duper hit. So to be happy with it, the success of this film, grandfather and grandmother had been to Kashmir for a holiday for about a month. But when they got back, they were hit by a surprise. The partners of the studio had sold the studio to somebody who did not know filmmaking for 7 lakhs. The investment that they had done in the studio was only 1 lakh, but the studio was sold in for 7 lakhs. And the advance that was paid then was only 1 lakh. So and grandfather was a major partner in it. So they did not want him to take the cake and walk away. So they had stole all the equipment and everything had gone away. The studio had to be shut and there was no choice for him to go back to film business. So left with no choice, he decided, yes, I will take this 1 lakh. And then he decided, I will not go back on any more partnerships. Let me do on my own. So he decided he will have his own studio. And he sent word to Bombay. He needed a camera and a recorder. And that is when the World War had begun. So when the World War had begun, he could not get they could not import equipments. And finally, when the war ended, the friend of his, one Mr. Akbar from RCA, he got grandfather the first camera and the recorder, which was sent to Madras. So that way they could start it. And once they got the camera, he was looking for a place. The next problem arose was there was a power cut in Madras and there was no power, so he could not start a studio as he had planned to do. So left with no other choice, he was just having thoughts, why don't I go back to my native place and start my own studio over there? So he went to Karakudi and he looked around for space and land. And he found that there was one property which was in Devakote, which was very close to an electrical post over there, where he had some friends who had supported him, giving him the connections as well, the electrical connections. So he was looking around Devakote, and right there in Devakote, next to the station, the Zamindar of Devakote had started a small drama place where he had bought Rajamanikam Pillai, who was a major drama player those days, over to this place and made him stay for 3 months. And he had built a station over there. So people in Devakote need not go to Karakudi to board the boat mail or to come to Madras. So he had started this station keeping in mind the travelers of Devakote. And to keep them entertained, he had started this drama place. So this place was not doing well. But when the grandfather approached him for the place, he wanted 2,000 rupees for the drama place per month and 1,000 rupees for the land surrounding it. So grandfather decided, okay, let me start my studio because I've got my power. I know the people around it. And he put up a lot of huts for women separately, for men separately. Toilets were constructed everywhere, and there was a separate restaurant area. Food was served to the women at the cottages, whereas men had to go out and eat. So everything was organized. Actors were picked up in Madras, bought to Karakudi, and that was the whole plan about it. But to launch AVM, he had a subject called Vedala Ulagam. It was later made into a film called Demonland. He did not want to start AVM because he wanted to make a name and he wanted to make something very strong. So he was looking around what he could do at that point of time. And when he came to Madras, he heard of a very, very successful play. It was called Namirvar. And at that point of time, during wartime, there was a lot of black marketing happening. A lot of things were sold in black market. And probably the initial stages of black money was very, very strong. So this play was based on black market and on independence movement, which I linked together. So he had met the director of the play, P. Neelakandan, who later on became a very famous director, bought the play for 3,000 rupees, and he decided to make it into film. He casted T.R. Mahalingam, his same crew who had worked with him earlier, and decided to do it. But what was the aspect of this film, Namirvar, was the rights of the play was a big hit because of the songs of Bharatiyar, and the rights of Bharatiyar's songs were held by a Marwari in North Madras called Sajmal and Sons. They had a recording company, so he had bought the rights of all the Bharatiyar songs, and he was holding on to it. He had bought it for 600 rupees. So grandfather had no other choice but to go and ask him, because this songs is what made the play very popular. So he went and met this gentleman and asked him, and knowing that he had bought for 600 rupees, he thought he had taken 10,000 in the morning, but he thought his bargaining skills, he could get it for 1,000, 2,000 maximum. So he went and sat with this man and started talking to him. He was very rude and not very friendly, and he insisted that he wanted 10,000. The rights were bought for 3,000. The director associates were all fixed for 1,000 or 2,000. How could you pay 10,000 for the song? It's a lot of money. So he started from morning and bargained with him. He went up to 5,000, but that man was still at 10. Then that man went away for lunch. He couldn't be bothered. So grandfather waited for him, and then the boy, the boy working there came up to him and told, "Do not bargain with this man. He will not bother about it. Just buy it at him, whatever price he wants it." And then the Bharatiyar songs were all bought by grandfather, and this film was made, and it was released on January 14th, 1947, before independence. It had the songs Aduvame, Palli Paduvame, Ananda Sudandram Kondaduvame by Bharadiyar. It had all the other songs of Bharadiyar, which were, if you know Tamil, yes, these are all songs based on freedom movement. And this film released, grandfather could not attend because there was a mishap in the family, and he could not go for the release. T.R. Mahalingam and P. Neelakandan went, and the film released in Madurai Central and was declared a super duper hit. So AVM's first film made at AVM Studios, Karaikudi, was one of the biggest hits. And then he decided that he would do the next film. He was a very staunch Gandhian. And at that point of time, there's a film called Ram Rajam, which had released. It was the only film Mahatma Gandhi had seen. And grandfather had seen that film, and he felt very emotional about it. It was a story of Rama and the entire the Raja part of it. So he had approached the producers, a Hindi film. So he approached the producers that he would like to remake in Tamil, and they said they will not allow him the Tamil rights. However, if you can convert in Tamil in any other format, he could do it. But he can have the rights of it only for 5 years. So he got back to Karaikudi, and this was the first film, Indian film, to be dubbed from one language to another language. Ram Raja was dubbed in Tamil and it released. It was produced at AVM Studios Karaikudi, and the banners also stated it was produced by AVM Studios Karaikudi, and it was a big hit. In Kerala, it was a super duper hit. This film ran extremely well, and it was a very, very proud moment for grandfather that he had made the second film. He then made Vedala Ulagam, the Demon Land, which I told you earlier, which the rights he had held, and that film also released, and that was again, it was not a very big hit, but grandfather had managed to see a play of an acting performance of Padmini and Ragini, the Travancore sisters, as they were called those days. So grandfather thought that their dancing skills were very good, and they had done a dance by Umesh Kumar those days, and it was a very, very Uday Kumar those days, which was a very, very popular dance. So grandfather wanted a similar item in his film, and he had done a musical number for these girls to dance. So they were brought into Karaikudi, and they had composed the whole thing, and that song was a 7-minute song in the film. And Vedala Ulagam ran very big because of this song. And of course, it was a horror comedy of those days, so the film did very well. So the next thing was, he got back with all the celebrations, and he was quite happy when the Zamindar of Devakota, he said that he was going to increase the tariff of his studio from 3,000 to 10,000 in 1947, 48, 49, whatever the period is. At that point of time, 10,000 is a lot of money for a rental of a premises in Karaikudi. So left with no choice, he decided he'll move out of Karaikudi. By then, Namirivar had released in Madras. 3 months after that, this was in March, April, Namirivar had released in Madras and was doing very well. And Mr. S.S. Vasan had seen this film. Mr. S.S. Vasan of Gemini Studios has seen this film and written to grandfather, saying, Mr. Chettiar, I've been really happy. We are all having big studios and we are doing it. And you have started film production from huts, and you have made a very big hit. And apparently, when everybody was doing mythological films, Namirwar was the first social film. So you have literally changed the trend of filmmaking, and please meet me when you come to Madras. So grandfather made a point to go and meet him when he went to Madras, and met him at Gemini Studios. He had just completed the making of the Tamil version of, he had just released the Tamil version of Chandralekha, which had not done well. Mr. Vasan had spent huge, very, very big money in the making of the film. And he said, I have not done well with this, but your small film has done well. What do you plan to do next? So grandfather said, I'm looking to start a studio. He said, why don't you pick up Gemini Studios? So he said, I want to start a studio, but I don't have money enough to buy yours. Moreover, I've got all the equipments. All I need is only a land. So he sent word through different friends of his. And the current property of AVM Studios was an evacuee property where the entire family, the Islamic family, the groups of people had moved into Pakistan. And this property was on a auction, and it came out on an auction. And he bought this current property of 10 grounds, 10 acres at 36,000 rupees. So that is where he moved in from Karaikudi into Madras. AVM Studios moved in here. And the first thing that he bought in was the floor, which was 120 20 by 80, 60 feet from Karakudi. The trusses were bought and that was assembled over there. The first theater, he wanted to see his own films. So till then he was not able to see his films. So he put up his projection theater with whatever money he had made in his earlier films. And what do he launch from his first studio? The film he decided was a script by P. Nilangandan, which already existed, called Valkai. Valkai had a romantic subject, and he wanted to launch that, and he was looking for a new find. Somebody suggested him there's a young girl who's dancing very well, to go and see her dance. So he found her, and she was a very, very good dancer. She had a lot of expressions in her face. She was none other than Baijanti Mala. Baijanti Mala was picked in for that film. The same T.R. Ramachandran was casted as hero in that film, and Valkai was made in the premises of AVM Studios. She must have been around 16 years old, and she was not living with her mother, Vasundhara Devi. She was living with her father and grandmother. And being a mother, being a little bit of litigation, how do you sign in it? So they had to get a tripartite agreement with the grandmother, the father, and the child together, and then let her act in the film. She was signed in for a 3-year-old contract. This Valkai released in December 20. Valkai once again had some problems regarding playback. This is the first film where his grandfather had playback songs, and Baijanti Mala's moments, her walks, her style, the song, the music, it became a very, 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 very big hit. This was later made into Telugu called Jeevitam, and then made in Hindi. Grandfather's first Hindi film was Baijanti Mala, where he introduced Baijanti Mala was Bahar. So he went in from doing Tamil films to Telugu. Jeevitam was a second film that he had done after Bhu Kailash, and Bahar was his first Hindi launch. Going to Bahar, he had been to Bombay with his director M.V. Raman, who had directed the Tamil version. So early morning they had been to see this director, and they got into a taxi. They went outside his house. I think it's C. Ramachandra, if I'm right. So there was a gardener over there doing some gardening. So they called him and said, "Can you call the music director? Is he here?" So the gardener looked up and down and said, "Who are you?" "We are producers from Chennai, from Madras." He looked up and down and said, "You're wearing dhoti." Both of them with dhoti, with slippers, and totally very traditional. He couldn't make out that these people can make any films at all. And he said, "Sorry, I don't make films for people like you. I'm the music director. I don't make films for people like you. I make for films for people like Bimal Roy," and literally send them off, saying that I cannot do. So they checked out in the market who's the next best person, and somebody said there's a very young person coming up called S.D. Burman. Why didn't you try him out? So S.D. Burman was cast, and Bahar, all the soundtracks were super duper hits. The film launched Baijanti Mala in a very, 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 very big way. So the first film to be launched in AVM Studios Madras was done in 3 languages, and all these 3 languages did very well. Then he decided that he always wanted to do something with a play called Or Iravu by Annadurai, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu. So he approached Annadurai, and through Neelagandan, his assistant, who was a story writer for Namilvar. So they both joined together and they had a talk with him. And he said he would give the rights of this play for an amount of 10,000 rupees. And he will write it in one night. Or Iravu's one night. And this screenplay, he said he will do in one night. So grandfather's room in the studio was number 10. Like Downing Street, people used to make fun of him. You live in a place like 10 Downing Street, 10 cottage number 10. So grandfather gave him that cottage. He came at about 9 after his work, his play, his politics. He came in the night, and then he sat down the entire night. In the morning, there was no one there. When people came in the morning at about 8 o'clock, the room had the entire script kept on it with a small weight over there. And he had a glass of water. There's a cup of water. That's all that he drank, nothing else. And he had left in the morning with this 10,000, which was kept in a cover. So that film, was a film which was launched, and I think Pani Legandan had directed it. The film was an average hit, but not a very big hit. Followed that was Parasakti. His distributor, Mr. Perumal Mudliar, had seen this play and approached grandfather saying, "I want to produce this film. You must help me out with this." Because he did not, to make a film, then you need a studios. and grandfather had a studio with the full support. So grandfather agreed to it. But the only thing grandfather was not too comfortable was this young boy who was acting Ganesan was very thin, lean, and not very impressive. So grandfather was not totally convinced with Ganesans right from day one. Shooting started. See, grandfather's got a habit of watching what do you call the rushes every morning. He saw this boy, and with the teeth sticking out in different places, he was not too comfortable with him. And then he spoke to Mr. Perumal Mugler saying, "I'm investing a lot of money in this. Can't we have the hero of Or Iravu coming? His film has done very well. He had done a film for another called Velekari, and Velekari was a very big hit. So as an investor, my returns are guaranteed, and K.R. Ramaswamy acts very well. Why don't we put K.R. Ramaswamy?" Is what grandfather had stated. But Perumal Mugler was very, very adamant, and supporting Perumal Mugler was the dialogue writer for this, which was Karnanidhi himself. The Kalaignar was the dialogue writer for it. So they were in support of Shivaji Ganesh. No, he will act, he will act, he will act. 10,000 feet was shot, and the film was almost getting over when the climax was shot. And grandfather saw the climax, and he was totally astonished by this Ganesan's performance. It was par excellence. And then grandfather decided, okay, does not matter. We will reshoot the portions where I'm not happy with. And 4,000 feet of that film was reshot completely. Parasakti was reshot, and the current version was the film released. It was a super duper hit. It had a lot of negative aspects. There was a Durga statue which people ridicule in the film. So there was a talk that the film was going to be banned, and a lot of things were going to happen. But this film ran and was a much bigger hit. And according to grandfather, the dialogues of Karnanidhi were far better than the dialogues of what Annadurai had written for Or Iravu. So thus started the process of AVM. In 1953, he had gone to Japan, and there he had met the producer Roshaman, and then he came back with the idea of making something like that. And that is when he had decided to do this film with Shivaji Ganesan, Andanal. And that was where Java Sitaraman script is a very, very advanced script where the story is told back and forth. The screenplay is told in a very, very suspenseful manner. A murder that's happened, and everybody's inquired from different aspects of it, and everybody's view of the murder, and finally who has done the murder was a suspense. So that film had no music, and it was just a very thrilling film, and it bought AVM another name. Going that way, he wanted to do films, and one after the other came. His most passionate film was in 1957. He had made a film which is called Hum Panchek Dalaki. He received the Lotus Award for that film, which was the first Lotus Award done by the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru. Grandfather had met Nehru in a crowd in Karaikudi when he had come for Alagappa. Dr. Alagappa had started a university which Nehru had being a Gandhian, he was a big fan of Nehru. And in that meeting, Nehru's secretary walked up to grandfather and said, it's a protocol from the Prime Minister. He wants you for breakfast tomorrow morning. And Jagdeep and Desika Rani were the casting of it. Jagdeep is known for his comical roles of children play. So the entire crew went there, and Nehru sat next to him. And he said one of his most memorable breakfast was that. And then he introduced grandfather to Vijayalakshmi Pandit and Feroz Gandhi. To grandfather, it was the only award that he has ever picked up. I mean, AVM has won several other awards for films done in the 60s by my father and his brothers. But grandfather never went to pick up any award. For him, the end of the awards was this Lotus Award. And today, I've been very lucky that the award has been given to me, which is, of course, in a safe, which otherwise I would have brought it and shown it to you. It's a very, very prestigious thing in our family. It's the first Golden Lotus Award. Following that was a film called Babi, which he had done. Of course, after Bahar, he had done several Hindi films. Bye Bye was done. And then after that, Bye Bye was a very, very big hit, where director Sridhar, the very famous director Sridhar, had done the screenplay for grandfather before he became a director. So that was Bye Bye. Kishore Kumar and Ashok Kumar were big actors, and they had acted, and that's how Bahar came in. Following that was Babi. Babi was a script written by Mr. Maran, the ex Mr. Karunanidhi's nephew, Murasali Maran. It was basically a family drama based on the Barbie. So, when Vajantimala and the director, they had left our studios, they hadn't left in a good note. So they had gone to Bombay saying that Bahar's success was theirs. And they had launched a studio called Raman Studio, in which Vajantimala had acted in a film called Asha. Asha was a color film made with Technicolor and processing done in London, and that film had released. Right across Asha was this Barbie releasing. Barbie is a very, very small budgeted film. And the heroine of the film is the Kannada actress Pandaribai. Grandfather had the guts to cast her as a heroine. And see, in Punjab or in any part of North India, the entire family circles around the Barbie. And this made this film a very, very big hit, that when Asha released, Asha was nothing. Barbie became one of the biggest hits of AVM and played in almost all over India. And it had, I think, run 54 weeks is what my grandfather stated, that Barbie had run. It was AVM's biggest hit. Following that Barbie, there was a function where grandfather was called to film chamber in Madras and another was presiding over it. And during his conversation, he had stated that he had been to Punjab for an evening for a political allies meet. And when he was there in the evening, they are of the habit of watching movies. And somebody said there was a film which was doing very well. So went into the theater. And when they walked in and the film started, the three letters AVM came in and the entire theater clapped. He was mentioning, he felt very proud that a man from South could go and capture the hearts of people all over India. So that was the extent in which Barbie had got us recognition. Following Barbie, grandfather had his biggest, film which made us, took us to the next level, which was Chori Chori, where Raj Kapoor and Nargis came to Madras and this film was made. It had the songs A Bigi Bigi, A Rati Bigi Bigi. I'm sure you know the songs of the film Chori Chori and the love story between Raj Kapoor and Nargis. And that took AVM to the hearts of all over India. Today, if I was in Russia, and when I was in Krasnoy, I was Tashkent, anywhere I go, I had a passport there when everybody could sing the songs which were from this film. It was a very, very proud moment when I was all over Russia. Anywhere in Russia, or anywhere where you find Russians, they know Raj Kapoor. And that's where AVM had gone. So AVM Studios kept going. But he had a lot of things happening. After that, his sons came in. A lot of changes happened. Many movies were done. And it went on to the 60s. It was a black and white era. And then we came back again with different type of movies, whatever it is. So we literally became a household name of many families. Today, we don't venture into it because it's quite a dangerous, very, very volatile game to play with. And it's not something that it was like those. It was a business then, not anymore. Mr. AVM's other side of life. He took a lot of care about his employees. Schools were started, which currently I run. One of them is an aided school, which he started in his father's name. Something that he missed through his life was his father. I mean, to anyone, his father is very great. He lost his father at a very, very young age. So he started the school in the name of Avachi, which is in Virigambakam, which is not far from our studios. And then next to it, he had bought about 10 to 15 acres. Way back in the 1960s, he started a cooperative society, which would lend, he had a seed capital on the society. The society would lend them money to build their houses, and they have to repay it to the society, where the society will take care of the needs. There were wells, there were water tanks, everything was designed and everything was done by the society. And next to it was a school where they could have their children studying. Kodambakam at the time of when he had developed was basically a village. The time that I was born and I grew up, there was no activities in Kodambakam. Today, of course, it's a very, very clustered and a very highly populated area, but not then. There was another thing that he was very particular on. Every time there was an interview of an employee, he would ask, how many children do you have? You know, those days in the 50s and 60s, people had a lot of children. They didn't have television. They didn't have any other entertainment. So it was just breeding of children. So the first thing they had to fill up is the number of children. If you have 2, okay, right across the road, he had built AVM Health Center. Maybe a very advanced thought. He had tied up with the Family Planning Association of India. They had to get themselves operated, whoever the man is, and only after that he was given a job. He had to stop at 2 children so that he could manage his family with the salary that he earns, and he could do it. So these were very different thoughts of his. It was not publicized or anything. He just did it for his interest. And basically, he was a very wholesome person. As to me, as a grandfather, but he was very, very meticulous. He was very particular on my education, what I do, what I study. And I was there, my prime age of my life, more than my parents. To me, I grew up with him. I saw him. Most of my holidays were with him in Bangalore. And the cycling area was Upper Palace Orchard Road. And for whatever reasons, I got married to somebody from Bangalore. And Prashant is my nephew. And a lot of things have happened to us that way. It's been wonderful, my experiences in Bangalore. And I think I've shared the initial stages of Mr. AVM's life. If there's anything anybody would like to ask on, yes.
Thank you very much, the Shanmugam. Wonderful hearing those blasts from the past, regaling us with stories which we probably never heard of. Wonderful. We have a few minutes. May I ask the members for an extension of 5 minutes? We can take a couple of questions before we close the meeting. The floor is open for questions, please. Please unmute yourself before you ask the question. Or you put up your hand, I can unmute you.
Vinod, Shivderia, can I
Yes,
ask a question?
Right.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Shridev.
Mr. Shanmugan, very congratulations on a very well chronicled life history of your grandfather. It's truly an awesome journey you took us through. All the ups and downs he took us, and the best part is how we remember all those little incidents. Really marvelous. I just have one observation. One knowledge I want to share with you. I was aware of that house 248 Sadashudaya, and we were told that the car would drive up to the bedroom door itself. Is it true?
See, the whole thing was in 2 levels.
Correct.
So we had an architect called Murthy who designed it. To us, it was quite fascinating because one goes up and the other one goes down to the car park. The central level was where the house was.
Correct.
And the bottom level was where the basic, the backup of the house was. He was very passionate on architecture. He was way ahead of times. The last thing he did was AVM Rajeshwari Theatre. I just like to bring this to your knowledge. He was not educated, as I told you. He called me to get my geometry box. So I took it to his room and I went there, and then he gave me some figures. And then I drew with a compass, I drew a round circle. Then after that, he gave me some measurements to put some in the circle, he gave me the measurements to make triangles. So the whole thing came in different shapes of a star. I don't know how he did it. He was basically into construction. His time spent was in Chennai was with Mr. Govindarao, with Mr. A.K. Shekhar. A.K. Shekhar was somebody from Germany who was one of the best art directors. Bangalore, Mr. Murthy. I don't know. I have not seen Mr. Murthy after that, but he had spent long hours with Mr. Murthy designing that house. It was a very passionate house where he had Chippendale to do the entire furniture. And any holiday, we were there with him. My grandmother will not come. So the last holiday, we were at Bangalore. He gave us a list of, this was in 79. He passed away in August. So I think this was in May. So we were all there and I had to look after him. Hold his hand and walk when we go up the theatres. Alankar, and that was something just in his mind, the one opposite the bus stop, because he knew Mr. Jayantilal very well. And then he wanted to go there, and we saw Yamagola over there, the film. Then we saw Kovadis. Then, all these films were ticked. The driver will go and get all the tickets. And we used to have this films, and that house is so much in my mind. The house is on one level, and it's another level down below.
The car used to go to the bedroom.
No, it wasn't the bedroom. Go to the portico, which opens into the house, which is, probably another versions have come out. That is my growing house of my growing years.
Thank you.
Mr. C.N. Kumar, Rotin C.N. Kumar, you have a question? You can unmute yourself. Mr. Kumar?
Yeah, I had a question, but I think somebody answered it. A really fascinating talk for somebody like me who's always followed Tamil films. I just wanted to know whether this was recorded so that I could share it with some of my friends.
Yes, it's being recorded. Kumar.
Vinod, I have a question.
Yes, please. Shaidu, please go ahead.
Mr. Shanmugan, it's been a fascinating talk. I mean, you just regaled us with all the things from the past and such a towering personality, your grandfather. I just wanted to just ask you, you spent a lot of time in Bangalore, but in your growing up years in Madras, not Chennai, I will refer to it as Madras. I recall as a young lad seeing your grandfather on 2-3 occasions at a place you will also be familiar with in Luz. It was the States Hotel at the Luz corner. It was called the Natraj and States Hotel, were a prominent place in Luz, where these dance performances of Ragini and those 2 sisters you mentioned, I have seen those. And there used to be a lot of these sessions of a lot of filmmakers, your grandfather included, will spend some time in the evenings, early evenings at 5 o'clock to have a cup of coffee and discuss. Do you have any recall of that place, sir?
No, I'm not. Probably it was before the 60s, maybe. See, I was
Yeah.
born in the 60s, so this must be. See, his activities reduced a lot after his sons came into the business.
Okay.
But once they came into the business, see, his pattern of working was completely different. My father came in. Of course, my father's he's done his own story on what he has done with AVM Kumaran. If you know Tamil, I can share the link with you. And it was
Sure.
done last month, and it has crossed over 2 lakh links in the last 1 month.
I see.
So I've had a lot of people saying that it was very interesting because he just spoke from his heart,
Yeah.
what he had been through. This is after the 60s. So grandfather was very active till the 50s as far as films was concerned. His sons came in around 57, 58. Kalatur Kannama was the first film. And Kalatur Kannama and Kamala Hassan, my father spoken about all that. I can share it with Prashant and Prashant can probably share it with Mike.
Sure.
That's a lot of interest which you will have in what he has spoken about.
Yeah.
Grandfather, to me, at that point of time, he became more a businessman after that.
I see.
Once his sons got into business, he was basically looking after the business. See, he started a lot of other things after that. His passion was subsidy stores, of course. Then he started something called the Oro Films. I don't know if you heard of it.
I have, sir. Yes.
Oro Films was something which came up to him in 1964-65. He was invited for this agency of this film company, which is Original AGFA. So it is all ORW stands for Original Woodford, whatever German it is. So that was started on later. And then he got into a different era altogether. And he was more into designing sets of probably Anbeva, if you see the sets, those are all done by him.
I see.
He was very passionate about and construction. At any given point of time, he had his own construction team working all the time.
What
house
happened?
that we had, every house had a different elevation.
So what happened to Saraswati stores?
But so the record business wound up completely. And with that came the end of Saraswati stores.
I see.
So the music business went down completely. We were agents for Gramophone Company of India. And we did, our logo was Columbia. And theirs was His Master's Voice. So the orange label was theirs and the blue label was ours. So we had our own artists. Saraswati stores had its own artists. But all the rights finally went to HMV. We had better royalties and all that. And later on, they all became freelancers. And the entire model of operation changed after that. So the company was taken over by Sarigama.
You did mention that the location, if I recall, was on Mount Road opposite LIC.
Exactly opposite LIC.
Yeah, yes, opposite LIC.
I remember that when LIC was in flames, we couldn't go in for 4 days.
Yes.
You remember the fire accident that happened in the LIC building? And the air conditions are all fallen in front of our premises. And the front glass was all completely damaged.
Quite right, sir. On the LIC, the other thing which I just wanted to mention here, as a young lad, when you used to go to Madras, you will find a lot of buses, tourist buses, and people coming from all over just to look at the skyscraper. So the 13 or 14 floor building at that point, the tallest building in all of South India, the LIC building, where people would come and just look at that building and go, tourists.
It was built by Mr. MCT Chidambaram Chettiar. who is the Travancore Rayons Limited, if you're aware of the name. He had started it. He was the first to start insurance company in India, and he wanted that building on the lines of Washington UN office.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So he built the building and it was nationalized, and they had taken over.
Take it. Very nice, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we run out of time. I'm sure many
I
of you
thought I'd
had.
keep it short because, see, this is all from the inscripts of his book, Yanadu Varkya Anubavangal, which he had himself written in 36 weeks in Kumudam. And I was instrumental in translating into English. Of course, it was published and later on it was sold out. And a grandmother wanted it done because the grandchildren, a lot of them didn't know Tamil. So she wanted to do this for the grandchildren. So that book was translated. So I was in the process of doing it. So it's all, I just had just a sweep through of it. To me, it's a very inspiring life of a man who built up whatever today we are. Today we have a visiting card because it is just one man who made us get what we are today and a family recognition. We continue to do where he left. I've converted Avachi School I've shifted Avachi School to another premises, and I've started Avachi College of Arts and Science a couple of years ago. And I continue the mission where he started off, education. He was not educated, but he wanted, the first thing he would ask somebody was, a boy comes in home, he'll say, what do you want to study? And then if he could offer any help for this child to come up in that, there's very particular people go abroad and study and get themselves educated. So I thought I have to take it any further. We didn't have a college, so I started a college a couple of years ago, the same premises, and we are trying to get it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shanmugan. Thank you so much. Since we don't have any more time, we would probably not take any more questions at this point of time. May I request Rotarian TV Mohan to propose the formal vote of thanks? TV?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting and a fascinating talk. It must also be a providential coincidence that you are with us today, sir, when we mourn the death of one of the greatest actors of our time. May Dilip Kumar's soul rest in eternal peace. Oscar Wilde wrote, "The perfect example of a perfect pleasure is what you have taught us today. It left us wanting more. What a magical tale you have weaved in the last 45 minutes. On behalf of all of us at the Rotary Club of Bangalore Cantonment, our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you for giving us an insight into the wonderful episodes that make up the life and times of your legendary grandfather. The Russian director Slavoj said, "Cinema is the ultimate perversion of art. It does not give you what you desire. It tells you how to desire." You did the same today, Mr. Shanmugam. You increased our appetites and our desires. One chance evening with the legendary Gemini Ganesh over many whiskeys at a friend's place has been the nearest I have come to fulfilling any cinematic aspirations. Although Sandhya, my wife, even today believes that I would have made a good Tamil movie villain. I'm sure all of us in the audience have had similar and better experiences, excepting probably Suman Shankar, who recently directed some aspiring actors of RCBC. Roger Ebert, the Pulitzer Prize-winning film critic, famously said, and I quote, "Old theaters and studios are irreplaceable. They can never be made again at today's cost. But more importantly, their spirit cannot be duplicated because going to the movies was a glorious and escapist experience. The town's old studios are the museum and sanctuary of our dreams." There is no end, sir. There is no beginning also. There is only the infinite passion for more art, more cinema, and more life. Thank you once again for warming our hearts, kindling our spirits, and arousing our creative genes. And many salams to Prashant, who brought you to our stage to set aflame this unforgettable evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, TV. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Once again, on behalf of Rotary Bangalore Cantonment, Mr. Shanmugam, a very, very sincere thank you. We loved your talk. We all enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thank you all, Rotarians and Anns. Thanks all the guests who joined us today.